Thank you for staying with us. The judiciary system in Nigeria continues to plan an unquantifiable role or play an unquantifiable role in the administration of justice and also decides the outcome of any election if challenged by defeated and aggrieved candidates, plays an active role in impeachment proceedings and actively participates in corruption investigation and prosecution, amongst others. However, in the past years, these roles and functions performed by the judiciary in Nigeria have been a subject of debate and questioning due to the widespread allegation of bribery and corruption amongst the juries and other court officials. According to Transparency International 2022 Corruption Perception Index, Nigeria ranks 150 out of 180 countries. With corruption being a major challenge in the country, Nigeria barely has faith in the justice system. Well, joining us in the studio is a lawyer, Inibehe Effiong. Inibehe, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Like I and Theophilus were having a conversation earlier, I said, after the general election, all eyes went to the judiciary. People became seemingly aware that there was a judiciary system in the country. The young, the old, everyone was, looking at the activities of the judiciary, following through. And then we now saw recent times talking about the appeals court judgments with regards to the removal of the Kanu, Plateau, and Zamfara state governors. So many issues, even legal luminaries were speaking with regards to the controversies surrounding these judgments, and it began to raise eyebrows. And then recently, the matter of certified true copies now came to the fore, and it seemed to have put a nail to the coffin, so to speak, on the matters or the mindsets people have with regards to the judiciary. A lot of persons were just speaking with regards to this. Now, talk to us, the judiciary being under trial as we speak. How did we even get to this point?
Thank you. It's quite an interesting matter. The judiciary as an organ of government occupies a very special position under our constitution. The role of courts, the role of the judges and justices is very unique in the sense that of the three organs of government, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary has a preeminent role of resolving disputes within itself and disputes between other organs of government. So you find like what is happening in Rivers State now, where the House of Assembly is factionalized. Yes. Some come supporting Fabura, other camps believed to be supporting Wike, and then you now have to submit yourself to the courts to have that resolve. We have also seen situations where even internally within the judiciary, when the judiciary is involved in crisis, it is also the judiciary that resolves that crisis. So what that does is that it places judges only next to God, because it is a judge who has the power to determine the fate of men. When people are tried for capital offenses like murder, like armed robbery, like treason and so on, if they are found guilty, a judge has the power to make a pronouncement of death legally on the person. So what that requires, or what that entails, is that when a person is appointed to the bench, it is expected that that person would live above board, that that person would be incorruptible, that that person would not be someone that can be easily influenced by external factors. Again, the judiciary is also special in the sense that it is the only organ of government that is reserved for a particular profession, the noble profession of law, even though that nobility is now being consistently questioned.
Yes.
So it is only lawyers. Every judge and justice or magistrate must have been a lawyer before you can go to the bench. So you have the bar and the bench. Now, in our country, the judiciary has, went through very trying periods. And in fact, the other point I want to emphasize to show how special the judiciary is that even under the worst military dictatorship, the worst military regimes in this country, the judiciary was always the only organ of government that was in place. When the military strike, they will resolve parliament, they will resolve the executive, they don't ever resolve the judiciary. At worst, what they will do is to promulgate auster clauses to limit the jurisdiction of courts.
Right.
But even in those circumstances, we still had judges and justices who, despite the impunity of the military, still asserted their authority, still held the military accountable. That shows I'm laying this foundation to say that more is expected under a democracy where judges do not necessarily function with guns being pointed at them directly or indirectly by military despots. So one would expect that in a constitutional, democracy, in a system of government where, the people elect their leaders, that judges will be more courageous, that judges will be more bold.
Right.
But what we have seen, quite sadly over the years, is that it does appear there's a strong school of thought within the legal profession that the judiciary seems to have even been stronger under the military. That judges seems to have been more bold under the military.
Right.
And that judgments, of course, were even more sacred under the military. That is quite an irony. That is not supposed to be the case. We have, for example, the Lucas Classicus case of military governor of Lagos State and Ojukwu, where the military governor of Lagos State tried to take Ojukwu's property, and then the matter went to court. While the matter was still in court, the military disregarded that process and still went into the property, and then the Supreme Court said you cannot do that. We had the case of, the Guardian newspaper's case, an authority of the Federation, where Guardian newspaper was read, and then they had their place seized. The court still stood up to it. We saw justices and judges under the military delivering very strong. In fact, under the military, there were instances where judges would say they are not going to rise until their orders are complied with. But guess what? Under a democracy, what we have seen over the years, you see courts make order, law enforcement agencies make a ridicule of it. You see courts, sometimes being very reluctant to hold the executive arm of government accountable.
How did we get here? That's the question. What changed?
I think we have always going to get to where we are. And I'm not saying that the entire institution is facing this problem, but the prevalence of it is one that cannot be contested. We got here because we have not invested in institutional independence as a country. Beyond even the question of lack of financial autonomy. Because when people speak about the judiciary, just like we speak about the executive, most Nigerians usually just pay attention to Abuja. But I kid you not, at the state level, the judiciary is even worse off. At the states, chief judges today basically have to prostrate before their governors to have the judiciary funded, to be able to even acquire, in fact, things like, I know a state, I'm not going to mention the name, but I know a state where the yearly almanac couldn't even be paid for. Yes, the calendar of the courts couldn't even be paid for. It is so bad that we see governors in Nigeria go on TV to say, I have bought 10 cars for my judges. I have bought SUV for judges. Governors don't make that announcement when they buy cars for commissioners. But in this country, we see the judiciary being treated as the department of the executive, as part of the Ministry of Justice. That has always been a problem. So we see the judiciary at the federal and at the national and the subnational level basically very reluctant to assert its authority, to assert itself. The other problem is also what looks like a moral crisis within the legal profession. Many lawyers, I know lawyers in Nigeria today who don't even want to be identified as lawyers anymore. I know colleagues who have thrown away their wig and gowns. They don't want to appear in court anymore because they have simply lost faith in the process. There's so much challenges that for us in litigation, there is so much that you have to deal with. There is so much problem internally that one is confronted with. That practicing law in Nigeria, we are beginning to lose the incentive for legal practice in our country. To make it more complicated, electoral cases has not helped matters. Because this is the area where judges and justices face the highest scrutiny. And that is expected because it is required in a democracy that governance should be derived from the sovereignty, from the will of the people. So when we see political cases go to court, the voters on both sides, they are usually very, very interested in the outcome of the process.
Absolutely.
They want to know whether really the person we voted for, his will is going to be, sustained by the courts. But again, it does appear that the politicians, unfortunately, have appropriated the Nigerian judiciary to an extent. And this is not my word. You heard what the learned, recently retired justice of the Supreme Court said. I mean, that speaks to everything.
Okay, so who do
that is going on in the court.
Who or what do we blame? Do we blame the politicians? Do we blame the judges? Or do we blame the lawyers? Because a particular judge at a point recently accused some senior lawyers of trying to bribe panel members to the tune of 10 million naira. And this allegation has not just come for the first time, that's been said before. So who do we blame in all of this?
Well, a young lawyer typically would not think of bribing a judge.
Definitely.
I've never heard of that. But that is not to say that, you know, I don't want to make a generic pronouncement. What I can tell you is that, and again, I think everybody in the profession agrees with it, that we have a problem of corruption in the judiciary. Mm-hmm. But that's not to say that the entire institution, you know, we should not portray the picture that the entire institution is plagued by corruption. There are very noble judges in this country. I've had the privilege of appearing before judges in this country that you can go to sleep. You know, the greatest strategy for a litigation lawyer, a lawyer who goes to court to make a living, is for you to do your research, do your work, prepare your processes, marshal your arguments in court, and at the end of the day, the outcome of the case is determined by what did not actually happen in court, by considerations that have nothing to do with the proceedings itself. That has always been a problem. Now, the judges, the lawyers, the court officials, we must also take our blame. Because it's not only, look, if, let's assume a magistrate, right, is offered a bribe, in some instances, the lawyer could have been involved in it. We have seen lawyers who have been sanctioned by the Legal Practitioner Disciplinary Committee for trying to influence judges over the years. We have seen such cases. But there has to be proper accountability. Now, the problem is actually that when we are speaking about the problem in the judiciary, let us not just focus on the appellate courts, the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal. Even at the magistracy, if you know what is happening at the magistracy or in some magistrate courts in this country, you will weep for this country. Because, I'll give you one very common example. Remand orders, where police arrest people and simply go to magistrate court and get an order to detain them. Now, we used to have what was called holding charge, where the police would just arrest you for a case, say murder or a serious case, that the magistrate court has no jurisdiction. They'll still take you to the magistrate. The magistrate will remand you in the correctional center or the prison, and you stay there indefinitely. And that accounted for the overcrowding, the overpopulation of our correctional center. The law, starting from Lagos State, introduced the Administration of Criminal Justice Law in 2011. At the federal level, we had the ACJ in 2015. But despite the passage of these laws, the police in particular and other law enforcement agencies continue to use magistrate courts to basically bastardize the criminal justice system. If you go to the Nigerian prisons today, look at even the effort the federal government is making to get 4,000 inmates released. The bulk of those inmates that are crowding is a failure of the judicial system. Because magistrates have, in very many instances, been very reluctant to insist that the right thing should be done. So the police will just simply go get the order. So this abuse has been going on, and very little is done to checkmate it, to change it. The other issue is character. Because the judiciary, despite all our complaints, is also a reflection of the Nigerian society.